The final act of the so-called Great October Revolution was, if anything, unspectacular. The storming of the Winter Palace, the seat of the provisional government, was a minor nocturnal skirmish, leaving 6 dead. Trotsky was highly satisfied with himself. He had made one of the least bloody revolutions in the history of the world. No one could guess what was to follow. The revolutionaries were in control of Petrograd, but little else. Their fate hung by a silken thread. Shortly after the revolution, Lenin asked me to become Minister of the Interior. I protested. Why not? He insisted. I replied, is it really worth handing our enemies a weapon like my Jewishness? Leon Trotsky had been born 38 years to the day before the October Revolution, on the 7th of November 1879. His name then, Lev Davidovich Bronstein. Life in the little Ukrainian village of Yanovka was hard and monotonous. His parents were Jewish farmers who had, unusually, managed to achieve a modest affluence. For centuries, the Jews had been suppressed and marginalized by the Tsarist regime. Trotsky himself didn't see himself as a Jew. He wanted to slough off this Jewish skin. He wanted to be someone for whom his origin was just an eggshell. The first photograph of Lev Bronstein, a self-assured 9-year-old proudly wearing his new school uniform. In spite of severe restrictions on Jews, he had made the breakthrough of securing a place in a school in the city of Odessa. A highly intelligent boy, he had real chances of success in the world. But he was not content to fit into the God-given order. He was a hothead, a rebel. He could not accept Tsarist rule, the smug complacency of the bourgeoisie, or the frightful condition in which the workers lived. Like many of the Russian intelligentsia, he was also prepared to accept hardships in order to follow the revolutionary path. In 1896, together with other like-minded individuals, Bronstein founded a League of Workers in the Odessa region. They felt they had a vocation to mobilize the proletariat for the class struggle. It was a dangerous adventure. At the age of just 18, he was arrested and sentenced. While still on remand, Bronstein married his comrade-in-arms, Alexandra Sokolov-Sakaya, 6 years his senior, a glimmer of light on the journey to banishment. It was a dark, mind-numbing life, far away from the world. The Siberian taiga allowed no political activity. I lived between the forest and the river. Cockroaches crawled over my table, bed and face. My life was filled with books. I studied Marx as I brushed the cockroaches off the pages. The restless Bronstein didn't put up with this political isolation for long. He escaped, leaving behind his wife and the 2 daughters born in exile. While on the run, he changed his identity. Lev Bronstein became Leon Trotsky. Now 23, he had a black sense of humor. Trotsky was the name of one of his prison guards. In London, he met for the first time Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, who went by the name of Lenin. A cool strategist, he thought, he saw in Trotsky a willing pupil. He sent him on a study trip covering half of Europe. In Paris, he searched for an apartment and found happiness. He fell in love with a revolutionary art student named Natalia Sadova. A carefree period began. The family in Siberia was forgotten, but the revolution remained at the center of Trotsky's life. With ambitions to make the world a better place, he soon developed theories of his own and fell out with his patron. While for Lenin the party came first, he wanted an organization free of hierarchies and constraints. For 14 years the two carried on a bitter struggle. In St. Petersburg in 1905, Trotsky put his vision of the revolution to its first test. After bloody riots, the returned exile declared war on the Tsarist regime in front of thousands of people. In October, he was elected chairman of the Soviet, the first such workers' council in the country. At the age of 26, he'd become a tribune of the people. For Trotsky, 1905 was the decisive year. He put his mark on the actions of the St. Petersburg Soviet throughout the 52 days of its existence. He changed from being a revolutionary journalist to the role of a revolutionary organizer. Get the workers away from their machines. Tear them away from the factories, lead them onto the streets, occupy the buildings, barricade yourselves, turn the city into a revolutionary camp. The dress rehearsal failed. The Soviet was crushed. Trotsky was arrested once more. While he was awaiting trial, new boundless plans were taking shape in his cramped prison cell. Now he was calling for the permanent world revolution. After a year came the sentence. Again, exile. Again, Siberia. This time for life. But even before his train reached the Arctic Circle, Trotsky managed to escape. His prospects looked grim. He had to make his way across hundreds of kilometers of uninhabited taiga. For the next 7 years, Trotsky lived in Vienna. The homeless revolutionary earned his living as a journalist and publisher. He was a regular at the famous Café Central, the rendezvous of Viennese intellectuals. Everyone knew the restless émigré. While the Tsar still ruled in Russia, he could not return. It was a time of waiting and collecting art, history, science. He was particularly fascinated by psychoanalysis, the powers of the unconscious, the mechanisms of manipulation. During this period, Trotsky developed into someone who lived a Western way of life. He retained this image of the Westerner. Many years later, this led to deep conflicts in Bolshevik circles. While in Vienna, Trotsky met his exact contemporary, the Georgian, Joseph Vissarionovich Djugashvili, alias Stalin. He too had dedicated his life to the revolution, but his struggle was being conducted inside Russia, underground. Trotsky found him lugubrious and provincial. For Stalin, Trotsky was always the arrogant Western bohemian. Two Russian revolutionaries, two worlds. On the 1st of August 1914, Trotsky had to leave Vienna. Europe was mobilizing for the Great War. Trotsky was an enemy both for Russia's allies and for its opponents. He was hounded from city